throughout the presentation. We are going to be recording this, so and we'll share it afterwards for those that weren't able to attend. And if you have questions, you can put those questions into the chat box throughout the presentation. We'll have someone monitoring that. Or you can raise your hand throughout the presentation if you have a question. We'll try to stop and answer those. And we're going to try to reserve a little time at the end for questions as well. So I think that's all the housekeeping. Once again, please keep yourself on mute. All right. So we're going to start off by doing introductions to the EGLE team, and I'm going to hand it over to our unit supervisor, Jeremy, to get us started.
Thanks, Jessica. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining. I'm Jeremy Hay, unit supervisor. So our unit is officially called the Environmental Health Programs Unit. Many of you are aware that we have the public swimming pool program, campground program, septic program, and now the water hauler program operating without out of our unit. So I will hand it off to Zach and we'll go down the list.
Yeah, I'm Zach Wagner, and I cover, I'm an environmental engineer for the group, and I cover the western half of the Lower P and the western half of the Upper Peninsula as well.
Hi, I'm Karen Beauchamp. I'm the swimming pool specialist. I cover 6 counties, but they're the larger counties in the pool program. So I have a handful of campgrounds, but more specifically focus on pools.
I am Josh Aiden. I cover southern half of Lower Peninsula as an environmental engineer in the swimming pool program and the campgrounds program.
Hi, I'm Barbara Quinlan. I'm an environmental engineer in the campgrounds and swimming pool program. And I cover the mid and eastern side of the state from Saginaw on up and through the eastern UP. And I recently picked up Leelanau and Benzie counties as well.
My name is Jessica Rosane. I'm the environmental quality specialist for the team. I work on more special projects and work on both the campground and the swimming pool side. Starla Walter is our public swimming pool administrator, and she wasn't able to join us this morning.
And I am Katerina Stevenson. I am the administrative assistant for the environmental health programs for pools and campgrounds and septage.
Okay, so that's our team. I know several of the engineers mentioned where they cover. This is our coverage map. Zach covers those dark teal counties. Barbara covers the lime green. The orange counties are covered by Josh, and Karen covers the light blue counties. This is a little bit of an outdated map, so there should be a newer one coming to our website that shows Barbara covering that Leelanau and Benzie counties. Okay, so when it comes to public swimming pools in Michigan, we rely on 2 things, our statute and our administrative rules. We will be referring to those a lot throughout this presentation. So our job is to ensure compliance with the requirements of Act 368, Part 125 of the Michigan Swimming Pool Rules and Regulations. We interpret and apply the regulations. We do not make the statute. That's done by the legislature. And then the administrative rules are created with the authority granted in that statute, and that process involved input from a bunch of stakeholders. So when we refer to the rules and the regulations throughout the presentation, this is what we're talking about. All right, and so this is going to be focused on inspections. And when it comes to inspections, we have initial inspections and annual inspections. Our initial inspections are conducted after a new pool is constructed or after a pool has been modified. This is typically done by EGLE staff or qualified and approved local health department staff. And these are to ensure that the pool is constructed according to the approved plans and meets all the pool rules. What we're more focused on today is this annual inspection. Act 368 requires that all public pools be inspected and licensed annually. Local health department staff conduct all of the annual inspections. EGLE handles the licensing fees, licensing paperwork, reimbursements, and any escalated enforcement actions. Local health departments track those MORs, their accident reports, bacteria sampling, in addition to doing those annual inspections. All right, so pool licensing really does matter, and the inspections that you do matter. Your job is really important. When we issue a license, a swimming pool license in Michigan, we are signifying to the public that that pool and the pool operators have met all the requirements and they're qualified to operate in the state. So when the people of Michigan see this license, they're trusting that we did our jobs and that that pool is safe, it's compliant with regulations, and competently operated. And it's on all of us, us at EGLE and the local health department, to ensure that we uphold that public trust. So when we're out there doing inspections, what our findings on that inspection directly affect whether an establishment can be licensed. So if you approve or conditionally approve a pool, it can be licensed. Pools are public health risks, so it's very important that we are paying attention. People can be injured, and we have a lot of accidents, even death, illnesses. So we want to make sure that we are being thorough. Inspection forms should be filled out accurately, and it's our responsibility as inspectors to make sure we are ensuring that accuracy. Okay. So throughout today's presentation, we are going to be focusing on pool inspections, the annual pool inspections using MiEHDWIS, and we are in a transition period right now. We're trying to move more towards using this dynamic form in MiEHDWIS. So you'll see a lot of screenshots of what the dynamic form is, what the questions look like. It is different from the paper form. That being said, everything you're looking at in the dynamic form is what you should be looking at. Same things when you're going through the paper form. There's a little bit of a different layout, and the dynamic form has more specific questions that kind of help the inspector know exactly what they should be looking for. We understand that some counties are still uploading the paper form, and some counties, have tablets and can do the dynamic form. So there's still going to be the ability to upload that paper form, but for training purposes, we want to go through the more thorough and more specific questions that are on that dynamic form. Some of the reasons we're moving towards MiEHDWIS, EGLE's no longer printing carbon copy inspection forms. So if you want to use that paper form and don't have any more of those carbon copies, it's something that you're going to have to print off yourselves. The MiEHDWIS dynamic form gives us consistency in determining severity of compliance issues. So you'll see in a few slides, when you mark something non-compliant in the dynamic form, it automatically tells you whether it's low, medium, or high risk. So that ensures consistency among your inspectors and from inspectors across the state. So it gives us state consistency as well. You can get links to the swimming pool rules directly in the dynamic form, and this is great for, especially for new inspectors. You can click on that link, and I'll show this in a little bit as well, and it opens right up, and then you can close it and answer the question. We get better data to track compliance and monitor pools. And like I said, we're still in transition. We recognize that there are definitely some limitations to using the dynamic form, and we're actively working towards improving that process. So if you've used the dynamic form and have feedback, please let us know. All right, so as we're preparing for an inspection, some of the things that you need to do before you go out into the field, you need to review some of the pool information. So for example, like what is the flow rate? If you're using the dynamic form, it will tell you the minimum flow rate on that form. But if you're not, it's important to look and see what that flow rate would be. Did they have any issues in last year's inspection? And then in the recent year, have they had any modifications or equipment changes that we need to be looking for? It's also important to look and see if they've been keeping up with their monthly operating report. Have they been sending in their bacteriological sampling? Have they had any accidents in the past year? If they are not sending the sampling or their operational reports in a timely manner, if they're not filling them out, adequately, these are things that you can all be marked on the inspection. And day of, things you should bring with you. If you're doing the dynamic form, tablet or a phone, or the printed form. If you're doing the printed form, you might want to have a physical copy of the rules. In MiEHDWIS, you can automatically get to those. A sample contingency plan or emergency response plan. Design detail sheet, if available. Sometimes this is available for a pool, and if it is, that's something good to take with you. It gives you a little bit information about the specifics of the pool, what type of equipment's there. It's more important, especially important if you're doing an initial inspection. And then a water test kit. If the establishment doesn't have the appropriate test kit, or maybe their reagents are expired, it's always good to have just in case. Okay, so if you're using the dynamic form, this is going to be your dashboard when you log in as a local health department inspector. You have some of your annual inspections, and you're going to click on the activity associated with that inspection. It's going to bring you to this page. And I'm sure all of you have seen this because you have to go through the same processes when you upload a paper report as well in MiEHDWIS. So you're going to click Begin Inspection. That'll bring you to this page. This top box up here where it says inspection form steps, that's really all your directions. So that's going to tell you all you need to know, what you need to upload, kind of give you any details that you need about what you're going to need to complete the next steps. So we are going to click on Start Form, and that will bring us to this page. And you're going to see this page regardless if you're doing the dynamic form or if you're uploading an inspection report. So it automatically gives you the information about the pool, where it's located, and you decide whether you're uploading the inspection report or you're going to complete the inspection questions below. And for the dynamic form, you want to select Complete Inspection Questions below. Once you click that, you can just scroll on down. It's all kind of on one page. And those questions are then going to populate down at the bottom. So you're going to fill in your name, local health department. If there is someone with you from the pool establishment, you're going to want to put their names. If they're maintenance, their own owner or manager. And you can add multiple people if there's multiple people there with you. Now this looks like it's on multiple pages, but this is really one page. You're going to scroll down. You'll see all the information about the owner, some of the swimming pool information, and you're going to select whether that's complete and correct or inaccurate and incomplete. So you're really going to review that with the person from the pool that's there with you to make sure all that information is correct. If there's a new owner for some reason and they haven't sent EGLE their information yet, you can click There is a new owner. That'll populate a new box where you just put in that new owner's details. In the pool information side, sometimes that information is there, sometimes it might not be there. For older pools especially, some of those details might not be in the system, and as we get equipment change forms, modifications, we are doing our best to get that updated in MiEHDWIS. So, but for newer pools, that information should be there. If you collect inaccurate and complete, another box will pop up below that, and you can just explain in there what information needs to be corrected. All right, and then we're going to scroll down and that'll bring us to our inspection questions. And like I mentioned before, one of the great things about MiEHDWIS and the dynamic form is that the pool rules are directly linked in here. So all those blue hyperlinks, you can click on each one of those, and that will bring you to the actual pool rules, where you can read exactly what you should be looking at, and then you can close that, and that will bring you back to the page, and then you can answer the question. Additionally, if you put that the question is in non-compliance, you're going to see there where you see medium and high. There's also a low severity ranking. And that will pop up on anything that is marked in non-compliance. Additionally, if you mark something in non-compliance, it's also going to pop up a comment box. Everything in non-compliance is going to need to have a comment. On the paper form, I think this is done at the end in the comments or remarks section of the paper form. But in the dynamic form on MiEHDWIS, it's after each item. It's important that you put, give us some detail about what the issue is, what the owner needs to do to correct that violation, and provide a timeline for when that should be done. And all of this information, all these comments are going to show up in your inspection report once you have completed. All right, and I'm going to hand it over to Zach to get us started on the questions.
Okay, yeah, thanks. So for the rest of the presentation here, we're going to focus on the actual inspection questions and then, what we need to look for during the inspection for these dynamic inspection questions. Feel free to raise your hand anytime as we're going through these questions if you got a question, and then or put them in the chat. And so as Jessica already stated here, we have 3 compliance options: yes, no, and NA. So for yes, nothing, it's good, it's in compliance. For if it doesn't apply to that pool, say it doesn't have a diving board, NA. And then if no is selected, we need to pay attention to that associated risk level. If it's a high risk level, there should be corrective action while on site, or it should be a failed inspection. Medium inspection or medium priority levels will be, kind of to be determined. Most of the time, medium level ones can be written as a follow-up inspection or next annual's inspection, but it's a case-by-case basis with that. And then while you're conducting the inspection, they're broken into sections here, real similarly to how the paper form is broken into sections. I think the sections are even labeled pretty similarly. So as you're doing that inspection on the dynamic form, it's okay to scroll down and skip around to different sections. If you're out on the deck and you want to complete everything out there, it's just fine to do it like that. And then skip back to the questions that you've skipped over. The system, when you go to complete the inspection, it won't allow you to complete that inspection if there's missing answers. So on the old paper forms, there was the ability to just not fill out stuff. So we did see that, missing flow rates, missing pH from time to time, missing chemical residual, and those are very important pieces of information. So the system with the dynamic form won't allow you to not fill those out. So we have to have an answer there. Next slide, please. So dealing with enclosure, Rule 28.1 says the swimming pool owner shall completely enclose a swimming pool facility by a wall, fence, or other protective enclosure. A swimming pool owner shall ensure that the entire enclosure, including doors and gates, is not less than 4 feet as measured on the outside, does not provide ready footing for climbing, and is designed to prevent passage through and under the enclosure. So, basically we verify the height, make sure it's at least 4 feet as measured from the outside. Verify that the fence or wall does not provide ready footing. For like the fence shown there, the max slot distance is 4 inches. And then if they have a chain link fence, the classic chain link style, it's 1 3/4 inches is the max opening for that chain link. Otherwise, it can provide foot holding. So things to look for, sometimes there'll be like a half stone wall with a decorative glass on top, or half wall that provides a lip out there to be climbing on. So they should provide something to prevent climbing if it's a situation like that. And then just make sure that nothing's placed around the outside. Make sure they don't have furniture that you could just climb up on and jump over the fence. Those are some of the things we're looking for. Next slide. So more with the enclosure, the doors and gates. Swimming pool rule 28.2, a swimming pool owner shall ensure that the enclosure specified in sub-rule 1 of this has at least one entrance. The swimming pool owner shall ensure that the entrance has a door or gate equipped with a self-closer, a latch, and a lock. A swimming pool owner or swimming pool shall ensure that the sliding type door is not installed. So these are very important to test. If it's an indoor pool or an outdoor pool with a gate, it's got to have that self-closer on it. The self-closer has to be functioning. Oftentimes for initials, we got to make an adjustment to these self-closers. We have to make adjustments to the latches. So it needs to self-close from a very small open to all the way open. So you test it from barely open, test it to wide open, and confirm that it closes on its own, that it's got enough closing power to get to the latch, and that the latch will actually latch. If any of these are non-compliant, that's a high level risk and would result in the failure of the inspection. So, the risks are obvious. If you've got a gate just wide open, a small child can wander in there, and so we have to make sure that the enclosure is fully secure. Oh yeah, sliding doors. We should catch that on the initial inspection if there is a sliding door, but sliding doors are not permitted, so that they cannot be allowed. If they are there, write them up on that. And then, so some other items from the questions here. Is there a wading pool? If so, a wading pool, but per the rules, has to be enclosed separately. And then if there's a spectator area, there needs to be a barrier between the spectator area and the active recreation area, and then or the active pool area. And then if there's a balcony, you should ensure that if the balcony is within 10 feet or overhanging any portion of the swimming pool, that it's completely enclosed or is designed to prevent diving into the swimming pool. So most of those things, if you got overhang, that should be on the initial inspection and should be handled then. You watch for construction if they've modified the enclosure in any way, shape, or form. We should know about it through a construction permit, but sometimes these things are done without our knowledge. So watch for any modifications. If they did modify the enclosure or anything else with the pool, direct them to put in a modification construction permit. Next slide. So the next section.
I think we have a question from Jamie. Her hand popped up. Jamie, go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
So what if, there's a spot that has like a lobby area. So there's a self-closing locking door to the lobby, but then there is a sliding door from the lobby to the pool. So would they have to get rid of the sliding door?
So oftentimes we'll see that like double entrance for like hotel pools, that you have that. And really, if the outermost door is your self-closing, self-latching, and lockable, then that is sufficient. That the way I understand it, that sliding door would not be part of the enclosure. It's inside, interior to the pool deck area. So I would say that would be acceptable as long as the sliding door does not provide an exit out of there, and there is another self-latching, self-closing, and locking door. Okay, next slide. So the next questions are related to diving areas and water depths, and there's just 5 questions here in this section. Next slide, please. So depth markers and no diving markers. Depth markers are required on each side, at each end, at critical points, floor slope changes, and at a minimum of every 25 feet of perimeter spacing. No diving signs must be in between the depth markers wherever the water depth is 5 feet or less. And then it's acceptable per the rules to use the words "no diving" or the symbols, and they have to meet the height requirements similar as the depth markers as 4 inches tall. And then these should be, these get reviewed in as their proper locations during the construction permit review process for a new pool. And so they should be installed where they are required, but we need to just confirm that they're still present and that they're still legible. Sometimes they're painted on and that's acceptable, but that paint can wear away or chip away. So we just need to make sure that it's clear. And then another thing, so more focused on initial inspections, but you should spot check that depth. And so our rules don't provide a tolerance for that depth marker, but the CDC's Model Aquatic Health Code, which we can use as a guidance, provides a tolerances of 3 inches as measured from the pool floor to 3 feet out from the pool wall to the gutter lip, midpoint of the surface skimmer, or the surge weir. So basically, you've got measure to your surface level. If you're on a skimmer pool and it's at the correct height, right about the middle of that skimmer, measure up there. If it's within 3 inches of that tolerance, it's acceptable. If it's outside of that, we need to change that measurement depth. Next slide. All right, this slide's diving facilities and starting platforms. Obviously, there's a lot of pools that this won't apply to, but if they do have diving facilities or starting platforms, we need to look and make sure that they're constructed to ensure stability and safety, to carry the maximum anticipated load, be constructed of corrosion resistant, easily cleanable, non-absorbent, and slip resistant material, have handholds on both sides of the ladder or stairway to provide diving board or to a diving board or diving platform. And then for diving stand or platform 1 meter or high above the water, having guardrails on both sides of the diving board, which extend to a position above the water, above the edge of the water, and which are equipped with intermediate handrails. A note here that is a diving stand or platform used exclusively for competition purpose can be exempt from this subdivision. So most of this applies to initial inspections, the materials used. So as long as it hasn't changed or they didn't do any kind of replacement unauthorized, then a lot of this will get checked on during the initial inspection. What we're looking for during an annual inspection is a visual of it. Make sure that it's in good working order. Make sure that there's not any cracks or any kind of defects on it. We're looking for the fasteners. The fasteners don't create any kind of hazard. There's no sharp edges on those fasteners. Put your hand on it, shake it, make sure the thing is stable. You're gonna have people, standing on it. It needs to support the weight of the folks. So if it's loose in any way, write it up. Basically that's it. A visual and hand check with it. If there's any clear problems, write it up. Next slide. All right, then this next slide deals with the pool deck, and this is, I believe, the questions are broken into 2 separate slides. So the first 6 questions here deal with the condition of the deck, the slope, the coping, and the drainage discharge. Next slide, please. So you can obviously tell from this picture, this is a non-compliant surface. The cracks, obviously this has gone for a long time without inspection. It may not be a public pool, but so we're looking for dirt, debris, build up in the cracks. We're looking to ensure that the coping is sealed, the joints are sealed. We're looking to make sure that the deck slopes away from the pool for at least 4 feet to the drain. And then also noted on there is ensure that the deck drainage goes to waste only. So we don't want that deck drainage being directed to surface water or anywhere else. It needs to go to waste. For an outdoor pool, allowing that deck to roll off to the edge, I believe is acceptable. But it shouldn't, if it's provided with drains at 4 foot from the edge of the pool, that drainage waste needs to be directed to waste. Next slide, please. All right, this is a pool deck continued. And this one basically goes over a little bit more regarding the deck structure, and then poolside shower, handrails or stairways and ladders, and drinking fountains, and also the hose bib and adequate hose. So next slide, please. So for the showers, drinking fountains, hose bibs, when you're out there on the inspection, we get a test the shower water, make sure that it's provided with tempered water. It also, the water created from the poolside shower should not create standing water. It shouldn't create a hazard. So we make sure it drains properly. I put my hand under there, and the rules state that the temperature should be not less than 90 degrees and not more than 110 degrees. Obviously, I think that's for the warm water. If you got cold water on there, it can be less than 90 degrees. But as you have the hot water turned on, it should come up to at least 90 degrees, and it shouldn't exceed 110 degrees. So I put my hand under there. I don't have any measurement device with me to measure the water temperature, but I do just put my hand under there. If it gets close to burning my hand, we've got concerns. And then the drinking fountains, make sure the drinking fountain works and is available. If the drinking fountain is outside of the enclosure, say it's like in a common hallway, oftentimes you'll see a hotel pool have the drinking fountain just outside the door to the entrance. That's acceptable. It just needs to be within reason, and you should be pretty close to there if it's outside. And then for the drinking fountains, the rules specify an angled style jet for the drinking fountain. So we have had some places, some facilities request to use like the Culligan bottles and dispensers. That's typically not allowed in maybe some rare cases. But the concern there is they don't refill the bottles, and then you don't have the water. So if there's alternatives for the drinking fountain, we can evaluate them on a case-by-case basis. Just reach out and we can discuss them. And then hose bibs, the hose bib, they have to have a hose bib. It should have backflow prevention. Our rules don't necessarily talk about backflow prevention, but just for safe drinking water, it should have backflow prevention on there. And then they need to provide an adequate amount of hose to clean the entire deck. So have them show you where their hose is. Usually it's in a storage room. It's not out on the deck. Have them show you, prove to them that they have the adequate amount of deck or hose to clean the deck. And next slide, please. So this slide goes over ladders and stairways. So confirm that the handrails are secure and tightly fastened, similar to like the diving stands. Just put your hand on it, give it a good shake. If it's loose, it needs to be corrected. It needs to be either be tightened or put new fasteners in there. Verify stanchion covers. Stanchion or cover plates are in place. That's around the fasteners. This picture doesn't show any stanchion covers, but a lot of times where that meets the ground, especially if that's up on the top, that will have like a little metal plate around it. And just make sure that that's in place. And if not, make sure that the fasteners don't create any additional hazard with, sharp edges or anything like that. For the ladders, confirm they're secure and that they provide slip resistant treads. They should be, the rules require them to be not greater than 6 inches away from the walls. And so they should, I basically give a visual on that, make sure it's within reason to the distance to the wall, and then give a shake to the handrail as well on that. Just make sure it's solid. And then confirm contrasting color and slip resistant tread on all stair edges. So you can see this one has good contrasting color and dark and light colored in the background for the pool color. Make sure we don't have any kind of missing tiles or delamination. And so the pool should have, for a pool that is less than 30 feet in width it should have one means of egress at each end of the pool. So this one should have, well, I can't tell the width here, but if it was less than 30, should have this stairway, and then in the deep end, it should have a ladder, one ladder on either side. It should be at your deep end point. And then for pools that are greater than 30 feet wide, you need to have two means of egress located on opposite sides and each end. So then you should have it at both ends of the deep end and both ends of the shallow. These rules for the number of means of egress, they don't apply for wading pools, slide pools, or spa pools. And next slide, please. All right, so this next section goes over pool water quality. We obviously know the importance of the water quality. This will force you to put the value in and also the pH value here. So, and then also we should be selecting, well, it forces you to. So you got to select whether it's chlorine or bromine. And then, so then if there's a stabilizer used, we need to check and make sure that it's under 80 milligrams per liter. And water temperature, we got to make sure it's under 104. Next slide, please. So this table is taken right from the rules, table 3, and it provides the minimum disinfectant residual that's acceptable. If you're under these levels, it's a failed inspection and the pool needs to be closed until it's brought back into compliance. So you'll notice here you have two different ranges, 7.2 to 7.5, and it gives you the acceptable lower limit for bromine, chlorine, and chlorinated cyanurate. And then also it gives you the range for 7.5 to 8. If the pH is under 7.2 or over 8, it's a failed inspection. That pH needs to be brought back into range before you can open the pool, because the table doesn't provide acceptable values for outer range. And then if there is, if you're using cyanuric acid, either being directly added or in the form of trichlor or dichlor, it does affect the chlorine's effectiveness. So you got to use this basically at 20 to 40 parts per million is this value. And then for higher level, you got to add 0.5 milligrams per liter or part per million for each additional 20 ppm CYA, or fraction of 20 above. So we do have a table, I believe, on our website that kind of breaks that down for where your cyanuric acid level is, where your chlorine should be. And then, so our rules don't directly address maximum residual levels, but we do have on our website a maximum disinfectant residual and operating ranges for Michigan licensed pools document. And that's, I guess, strong recommendation that basically if you're over 10 parts per million on your chlorine or over 8 parts per million on your bromine, that the pool should be shut down and that should be corrected. And yes, so next slide, please.
Zach, I have
There's a
quick
question.
Yeah, could
Yeah.
you just clarify, just make sure I heard you right? So, if chlorine or bromine exceed the those levels you mentioned, it's a recommended closure, or those are required to be closed?
So it's not
If they
written
exceed.
directly into our rules. We strongly recommend closure. I don't know, Karen, maybe you can help me out on this.
So the premise for that higher limit is kind of twofold. One is that most test kits max out at that. So if you have above that, at that, I guess it will read it, but above that, you're going to have to do a dilution factor. And secondly, well, first off, the manufacturer recommends that higher limit. Then secondly, the CDC has health issues when the residual is at a high limit. You're going to see skin irritation, eye irritation. The facility is most likely going to get complaints. So we recommend that it's closed till they bring it down a little bit more. It would be in their best interest to do so anyway, just for the complaint aspect, and as well as they're wasting a lot of chemical to operate at that high. Now, that being said, there could be instances, where they may have a function like a competition pool. So they want to bump that up a little bit to compensate for that big bather load. Those are one-off instances, which, can be acceptable because you're going to get that big influx of a bather load. And that residual is going to drop significantly very quickly. So, but a typical hotel pool, for example, they may anticipate a weekend load, but other than that, they shouldn't be operating continually at that high of a level. It's just a health issue. So that's why we recommend it. I would like to say we would require it, but again, as Zach mentioned, it's really not in our rules that we have the authority or ability to indicate a closure, but that's where we come from on that stance.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks, Karen. All right, next slide, please. All right, this slide covers cyanuric acid. Stabilizer, is used typically for outdoor pools because sunlight degrades the disinfectant. Without cyanuric acid on a chlorine pool outdoors, you're looking at 90% of your disinfectant residual to be eaten up by the sun. Whereas if you operate in the optimal range for the cyanuric acid levels of a 30 to 50 ppm, it's taken down to, I think, 10 to 20% degradation. So trichlor and dichlor have this CYA, cyanuric acid, built right into it. And then oftentimes you'll see cyanuric added directly to the pool for stabilizer, and then just normal chlorine use. So it can be added in either form. It shouldn't be added to the pool while the pool is open. And then it can't exceed, per our rules, it can't exceed 80 parts per million. So if it's above 80, it needs to be closed, or it needs to be corrected while on site. And really the only way to correct it is dilution. So you're just gonna have to drain water and put more water in, or allow the sunlight to eat it up. And then, so we do see trichlor often in indoor pools. If they're on an indoor pool and they've got a sand filter where they're doing backwash pretty regularly, that level may just kind of take care of itself with that backwash. And if they're on cartridge filters and they're on indoor, they're going to have to drain water out to get this thing, and they're going to have to test for that. I think it will get covered later in the monthly operating reports, but the cyanuric acid needs to be tested once per week, where everything else needs to be tested at least twice a day. So just once per week. It doesn't build that quick, but it does need to be tested. So we need to verify, hey, are you on trichlor? Are you on dichlor? Are you adding cyanuric acid? If so, they need to test for that. If they are not, they don't need to test for it. Next slide, please. All right, so bacteriological sampling. So the Act 368 requires a minimum of quarterly bacteriological sampling. Health departments have the option to increase the sampling frequency. I know there's a lot of health departments that do monthly on that. And then the time at which they submit them is kind of up to the local health departments on the scheduling, often within 10 days of the end of the month. But as long as you work out that frequency and when they should be submitting them with the pool, then that's acceptable. If they're missing bacteriological samples, it could warrant a closure. A positive sample result would warrant a closure. So, if they're missing them, have a conversation with them. Why are they missing them? Why aren't they putting them in? Get them back on track. If they continue to stay off a track and they just don't show any concern for that, then that could lead them to a closure until they get back on track. Definitely cited on the inspection report if it's on there. I think the dynamic form says have bacteriological samples been collected, and that doesn't necessarily mean you're on site. Now, there may be a few people that take a bottle with them and just collect it while they're on site, but for the most part, these are handled outside of the inspection, and the results should be being sent to the local health departments. Now, we don't see those results, so we don't see that if they're not submitted or if there's concerns with them, we don't see them. They go directly to the local health department. So if there's questions or concerns with it, you always can reach out to us and we can assist. Yeah, so it could warrant closure. Definitely a positive, but it could warrant closure. But for the most part, I would try to get them back on track before I would close them if they don't have the sample. Next slide, please. All right, this slide talks about water temperature. So the rules require that the water temperature does not exceed 104 per Rule 94. Water heaters are not required. So if they just have the water at whatever temperature the water is, that's just fine. If the normal water temperature is above 86 degrees, a caution sign needs to be provided. So most of the time, this is a spa if it's going to be that warm, but there are some therapy pools out there that run at 90 degrees or so or above. In the signage for that would be very similar to the sign that you would have on a spa that's basically should state the maximum operating temperature and then provide any other pertinent health warnings and warn against the use of the pool by children when the normal water temperature is more than 86 degrees. So if that's the case, they should have signage up for that. On the heater temperature, the heater needs to be installed prior to the heater. If you get the heater or if you get the thermometer right after, you're not going to be getting an accurate, you're going to get an elevated temperature. It's not going to be reading accurately because that mixed water doesn't have a chance to cool down yet. So we really want to see, we need to see that on the inlet side of the heater. We have accepted that if there's an inlet temperature provided by the heater on the digital readout, that we can accept that temperature reading as a thermometer. Next slide, please. All right, water clarity. So quality, we talked about already with the testing. Clarity, you should be able to see the main drains from 30 feet horizontal distance or the entire bottom of the pool, you know, if it's smaller than that. So for the picture shown, it's obviously too cloudy. You can't even see if there's a main drain in this pool. I'm not sure. I don't even see skimmers. This may be a residential pool. Kind of looks like a residential pool. One other thing I note on here, you see a floating chlorinator there. That's not acceptable either. The chlorinator needs to be hard plumbed into the system. So this pool would result in immediate closure because you can't see the bottom. Next slide, please. All right, next slide talks about pool structure. So some of this on the pool structure is related to how it's constructed initially. And then, you know, it also relates to, did anything change out there? Have hazards been introduced? Did they do unpermitted construction with the structure? But for the most part, your structure, your pool structure is not going to get modified unless there's a major modification. And we should know about that. And if not, then point them in our direction. Next slide, please. So you can see this is just some pictures of poor condition for the structure. So if it's starting to delaminate, this is shown on the stairs. Obviously, these stairs should be marked in dark contrasting colors, so these stairs would be non-compliant on that alone. But you know, it's chipping away right here. It's kind of a judgment call on that. Is the delamination or is the concern a serious safety risk where people could cut their feet on it? If so, it could be closed and have to be corrected right now. Otherwise, we could give them a timeline. Hey, this needs to be corrected in the next month. Hey, this needs to be corrected by the next annual inspection. It's kind of your determination while you're on site based on what you find. Cracks on, you know, missing tile on the pool wall. Definitely should be corrected. If that gets written and say you allow it till the next annual inspection and it's still there, it should be elevated and it should be corrected. Yeah, you know, oftentimes we'll see that they'll repaint a pool, and we may not hear about repainting a pool. The rules do require, Rule 22.3 requires the pool to be a light colored, except for dark marking may be inserted against a light background. So sometimes we'll see them repaint the pool, but they select a color that's too dark. We need to know about that, I guess. And so determining how dark it is, we can assist with that if there's questions about if it's an acceptable shade or not. I think the Model Aquatic Health Code provides some additional guidance on that, and maybe with a Munsell color chart. So yeah, so if it's too dark, it looks too dark to you, it's probably too dark. And then another thing that we see is, you know, staining or discoloration on the bottom, usually maybe towards the main drains, but you'll see like rust, discoloration. And if that gets too dark on that pool, and depending on its location, it can create a hazard to where you can't see well on the bottom of the pool. So that should be corrected and written up as well. And next slide, please. So this slide talks about pool sides and bottom smooth and clean. So this is a liner pool. You can see that there's some issues with the liner being just kind of jammed up together. That was probably an installation concern, but because of that, you've got bacteria that builds in that crack. So that should be corrected. On there, I don't know how easy that correction is with a liner, if they can cut that and reseam that or what, but that's on them. The ease of the correction isn't our concern. It just needs to meet the intent of the rules. It shouldn't be dirty. If there's a bunch of dirt on the bottom, they should be running a pool vac regularly. This is part of the monthly operating report. You got to check on there that you're maintaining it, that you're cleaning it properly. So if that's not the case, write it up and make sure that the next time you come around that it is clean. And next slide, please. And I'll hand it over to Josh now. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Zach. This next set of questions continues to deal with the pool structure itself. These are things we're looking at when we're walking the deck and we're inspecting the pool and the deck and that portion of the inspection. Next slide, please. So the first couple of questions are with regards to any ledges or underwater seating, having a color contrasting stripe to allow that seating or that ledge to be clearly visible. You can see here in this picture, they've got a bench that goes along the length of the pool. It needs to have a color contrasting stripe on it. Similarly, ledges are pretty rare. They're usually only allowed for structural reasons, but if there were a ledge, it would typically be in the deep end, and it would similarly need to have a contrasting color stripe on it. Or sometimes in a therapy pool, they'll have a ledge or a drop off. Typically, a drop off is not compliant with the floor slope rules, but you know, in a therapy pool, certain exemptions are made. If they do have a ledge or a drop off, we want to see that has a contrasting color stripe on it. Another note with regards to benches is that there's a rule that says the walkway, which is like the deck area next to the pool, needs to be marked in a manner to warn swimmers that there is a bench down there. So, you know, typically you've got your depth markers and your no diving signs. Well, above this bench, there should also be a sign. Typically it says bench below or something like that, so that someone jumping in off the deck has that warning sign that there's a bench down there and don't jump on it. Typically this stuff should be reviewed and installed during the permit process, during the permit review. But you know, they get cracked, they get faded. Just take a look and make sure that kind of thing is still there. Okay, next slide, please. So the next question has to do with skimming. Question is the water level at an elevation suitable for continuous skimming flow into the overflow system without flooding it? Okay, so there's two major types of pools here for those who aren't familiar. There's a skimmer pool and a gutter pool. Skimmer pool has a number of skimmers kind of shown in that top picture there, which has a little box, and that's where the skimming action comes from. So every pool, when they're turning over their water, they need to be pulling water off of the surface and cleaning the surface of the pool. Otherwise, hair and oil and other floatable contaminants will just stick around. So that's why skimming is necessary, to get rid of that surface floating contaminants and send those to the filter and get them out of there. So for a skimmer pool, you're looking at these skimmer boxes, these open rectangles there. For it to work properly, the water level needs to be about halfway up that box. If the water's below the box or above the box, the weir's not going to work as it needs to. The pool's not going to skim properly. Now, the other type of pool besides a skimmer pool is a gutter pool. Think about your Olympic size, competition pools. They have a full gutter that goes all the way around the complete perimeter, rather than having these little skimmer openings at a few locations. For a gutter pool, if there's nobody in the pool, the water level should be pretty much right up to the lip of that gutter. And then as people jump in and splash and whatnot, then that pushes water up over the lip, and that creates the skimming action, and gets those surface floatable contaminants out of the pool. Okay, next slide. This shows a cutaway of what one of those skimmers looks like for those who are not familiar. The key item here is that floating weir shown in the middle there. So that's it's a kind of a flapping gate that floats, and as it floats, it also creates a weir, which is a one-way pass for water. Water can go over it, but it can't come back. So when we're checking these, we want to make sure that weir is floating, that it's not stuck down or stuck up, which happens. It should be floating, and it should be creating a weir. Now, an alternative version of these is called a floating basket style, where instead of that flappy weir door that floats, the skimmer basket itself is going to float up on the water surface and create a circular weir. They work very much in the same way, but two different styles you should be aware of. Another thing to note here is at the bottom, there's that diverter plate, which allows them to open or close the suction pipe so that they can get more or less flow through that particular skimmer. It's a way for them to balance the skimmers. More on that in a second. Next slide, please. So the inspection item asks us if the system is functioning and clean. On the left is pretty typical what you'll see when you open a skimmer. That basket is where they'll collect leaves and frogs and kids' toys and all kinds of fun stuff in there. They should be emptying that basket, dumping it out. If it's overly full and not being serviced, then it's probably not working like it's supposed to, right? In that picture on the right, that's just an example of a floating basket style. So the weir is actually that ring at the top. This basket will float on the surface, and that top ring will create the weir that lets water come in but not come out. Okay, next slide, please. So here is a little schematic of the suction system, right? So in the pump room is where you got your pump, and that's pulling water from the skimmers, which, like I said, are trying to turn over the top portion of the water to get those surface contaminants out, and also pulling water from the main drains, which are at the bottom of the pool, to get the water at the deepest portion of the pool to turn over. But anyways, if you're looking at the skimmer system here, just from what we know about hydraulics, if you've got three skimmers on one line, All other things being equal, you would expect from this picture, maybe skimmer 1 works super good because it's close to the pump. Skimmer 2 being further away from the pump may not work as well. Skimmer 3 may not work at all. So what they need to be doing is balancing these skimmers, and that's why I referenced the diverter plate. That's how you would balance the 3 skimmers. You should be observing bubbling hydraulic action within all of the skimmers. When you pop the lids open, if you're only seeing, skimmer 1's working great, skimmer 3's not doing much, maybe what they need to do is close the diverter plates and balance these 3 skimmers. You want to see relatively equal hydraulic action, skimming action in all 3. Pretty common thing that I find. Next slide, please. Okay, the next question on the inspection report asks, do the pool water inlets comply? Now, the inlet is where the treated water, after it's been pulled from the skimmers and from the main drain and sent through the filter and chemically treated, this is where it sends the water back to the pool. Kind of looks like these jets. The number and the location of these should have been dictated through the permit review process. We're not asking you to make sure they have the right number and that they're in the right location, because once they're installed, they're probably not going to move. What we're asking you to do is make sure that they aren't broken or missing their covers. And another good idea would be, if it's a spa and they've got a jet pump, turn that jet timer on and make the jet pump do its thing, and just make sure it's not splashing water out of the pool, causing standing water on the deck, that kind of thing. Okay, next slide. Now the next question is, do the swimming pool main outlets comply? The main outlets are more commonly referred to as main drains. Zach kind of talked about them earlier. Those are the boxes at the bottom of the pool where the pump takes its suction. The pump is directly connected to these things. So it's very important that the covers on these grates are intact, not showing any sign of being broken or loose. Next slide, please. So regarding main drains, this is, as I understand, the only or one of the only bits of federal regulation that applies to our swimming pools. Everything else we've talked about is from the Michigan swimming pool rules. The reason it's a federal regulation known as the Virginia Graham-Baker Act, Virginia Graham-Baker was a young girl who was entrapped to a main drain and was drowned, and it killed her. At the time, as I understand, a lot of pools only had one main drain. And as a result of that, the federal government stepped in and decided, hey, we need to have at least 2 main drains. So that way, if a little kid sits on one of these, they're not going to be entrapped because there's a second drain to prevent the suction entrapment. So this happened around 2008, 2009. We went through every pool in the state and made sure that they were all VGB compliant. And another key aspect of VGB compliance is with regards to the grate covering, right? So the cover on that grate is designed for a certain flow. And also they have an expiration too. Typically the plastic ones, as I understand, will be 7 to 10 or 15 years expiration on those plastic grate covers. Since that big effort in 08, 09, we honestly haven't done a great job of seeing that all of these are getting replaced as necessary. So there's a very good chance that there's main drain grate covers out there that are expired or have been expired. And the only way you would tell is if you had the documentation or if you were able to read it off the grate cover, what the expiration was. Now, we don't really expect you guys to dive in there and try to read that off the grate cover. But I guess the point is, know that there's a good likelihood that some of these are expired out there. Please keep a close eye on them, making sure that they're not cracked or loose. A lot of times what we'll see is the fasteners are missing. Maybe there's one in one corner and one in another corner, but the other corner's busted off, or they've used a zip tie to try and stick the thing back down. Anything like that is evidence that it's probably time to be replaced. And maybe have a conversation with the owner or with the operator. Hey, do you know when your main drain grates are due for expiration? Do you know when they were installed? That kind of thing. Okay, I think that's enough on that. Next slide, please. Okay, so the next set of questions has to do with the operation of the pool, water testing, operator compliance, having an emergency response plan on hand, and doing your MORs, your monthly operation reports, that kind of thing. Next slide. So the first question is, do they have the equipment for testing the disinfectant, pH, and other chemicals as necessary? So as far as your test kit, the rule specifically requires that they need to have a DPD test kit. That's this chemical here, NN-diethyl, yada, yada. That's the DPD chemical. If they're not using that to test their disinfectant, then it's not an approved test kit. So for example, the test strips, you can get them online. They really have no consistency with regards to their accuracy or the sensitivity. They're pretty much useless in our opinion. You need to be using these DPD test kits with the liquid reagents. Another thing to note on that, and it looks like that little bottle there to the right. Another thing to note is that they expire. They are chemical reagents. They tend to expire pretty quickly. Keep an eye out on their test kit and just make sure their reagents aren't all expired. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so regarding the pool operator, every pool needs to have a designated operator. Our rules do not require that that person be a CPO, that's a certified pool operator. You can obtain a certified pool operator's license by taking courses, and the license is good for 1 year. We don't require that statewide. However, as I understand, there are some counties and some health departments that do require they be a CPO and they maintain a CPO license. Regardless, it's a good recommendation. What our rules say is that you need to have a qualified person, or a competent person. How are you making that determination? Does the operator know when to run a backwash cycle? Do they know how to run a backwash cycle? Are they familiar with the test kit? Do they demonstrate general competency or knowledge of how to operate their own system? And are they readily available? If they don't have a clue what they're doing and you think that operator competency is leading to issues at the pool, please cite this. Strongly recommend that they obtain a CPO. This is a pretty common violation. And in some cases, we can require that a certain pool obtain a CPO. We have the support from the rules to do that if we need to. Okay, next slide, please. So the next question is regarding, is the operation permit fee paid and or current license displayed? So the way the system works is, regardless of whether a pool is licensed, they will generate an activity to have staff go and inspect them as long as it's listed as active. So if the pool has been closed for a couple of years or it didn't get inspected last year and it doesn't have a current license, we'll still be expected to inspect them. But this would be a point where you mark this as no. If they do have an active license, like they passed their inspection last year and they submitted their paperwork and fee payment, they should have an active license, and it needs to be displayed in a conspicuous place. Okay, next slide. And I saw the comment from Jamie. When do you run a backwash cycle? I believe we have a section on sand filters coming up later, and hopefully that'll be addressed. Next slide, if you don't mind. Okay, so this is the operation report form, or the MOR, monthly operation report. So per the rules, all pools are required to fill out a monthly operation report and send it to the health department every month. This is a log of the chemical testing that they've been doing. If the MORs have not been coming in consistently, or if you feel they're inadequate, or they're just writing the same thing every day, every month, cite this as a violation, and let's get the MORs back on track. Next slide, please. This kind of shows, okay, this is like the table where they will put in all their numbers. So they're supposed to sample for, or required to sample for, their disinfectant level at least twice per day. As Zach mentioned, if they're using a cyanuric acid product, a stabilizer, that needs to be recorded minimum weekly. And there's different columns for other chemicals depending on what's used at the facility. Now, with regards to the MORs, I always remind the operator that this is in their best interest to do it, and to do it properly. Inevitably, at a public pool, someday someone's going to come up and claim that your pool made them sick, or gave their kid hives or a rash or whatever. And really the only legal protection you have is this MOR. So when that happens, somebody's going to submit a FOIA request and ask for all your MORs. If you didn't do one that month, it doesn't look good. Or if you did one that month and it just has the same thing written down every single day, it doesn't look good. If you did your MORs properly, you can say, hey, look, I tested it in the morning, I tested it in the afternoon, it was a 3 in the morning, it was a 4 in the afternoon. That's really the best defense you have in that situation. So always try to frame things in that perspective, that it's for your own best interest to run this pool as well as you can. That applies to a lot of things, right? Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so the next question on the inspection is with regards to a contingency and emergency response plan. So a contingency plan, AKA an emergency response plan, tells the operator or a backup operator what to do in case of a contamination. For example, if there's a fecal contamination, if there's a blood contamination in the pool, what do you got to do? One example of this is, it says you evacuate the pool, you raise the chlorine level to 10 parts per million, and you keep it there for a minimum 2 hours. And that's considered the correct process to make the pool safe after coming in contact with like a blood pathogen. So they should have this plan and a physical copy in their equipment room somewhere, usually in a binder or something. And definitely, if the operator's not around or not available, it's important that we have a physical copy so that the next person up will have instruction on what to do and doesn't just need to know this off the top of their head. We have a version on our website. I like to print out a copy and just take it with me. So that way, if they don't have one on site, I can just hand them the one that I brought and they're in compliance. If they don't have one, never heard of it, cite this as a violation and let's make sure they get an emergency response plan on file somewhere. Okay, next slide, please. The next item is with regards to bacteria sampling. Zach covered this earlier, I believe. This is the kind of thing where the The rules require minimum quarterly. Some health departments have increased this to weekly. Some health departments have increased this to monthly. And failure to collect samples or to collect the repeat samples or to report the results on time, this can be cited. This is the kind of thing where maybe you want to do a file review before you head out there to see, have they been inconsistent? Have we missed one or two here or there? If there's been issues with these, then you can cite it on the annual inspection. Kind of like the MORs. It's a good idea to do that kind of file review ahead of time before you go out to do the inspection. If the MORs are spotty or incomplete or unsatisfactory, right, we'll know that from our file review, and then the annual inspection will be our opportunity to cite that as a violation to be corrected. Okay, I think that's good. Next slide, please. Okay, the next item on the inspection report is with regards to construction permit approvals being granted for any major modifications to the pool. Okay, so if they're doing major work, if they are breaking the pool shell or if they are replacing all the pool piping, they need to submit for a construction permit. We'll call it a modification permit, but it's a construction permit. That's if there is major work done. One informal standard we use is if there's concrete being broken, probably needs a permit, right? If you observe this type of work that had been done, but you don't have a record of a recent permit that was issued, cite this as a violation. We'll take a look and see if they needed to have gotten a permit for that. If they did and they didn't get a permit, we'll make them do it retroactively. This does not apply to changing out equipment. If they change their equipment, such as their pump, their filter, or their chemical feed equipment, they need to submit an equipment change form, and we will review that equipment change form and make sure that the equipment they're proposing is suitable. A lot of times they'll put in equipment without telling us or asking us, and then come to find out the equipment is not rated for the flow rate, and they got to change it out. So important for them to be getting the equipment change form if that's what's necessary, but if there's major work being done, note they need a construction permit. Next slide, please.
Josh, we had a question. Does this include changing out fixtures or drinking fountains?
Like bath fixtures? Typically not, as long as they're keeping the same number. Okay, like if they're going to demolish their bathhouse and rebuild it completely, I think typically we'll issue a permit in that case. But as long as they're doing like for like replacement on a fixture, no, I don't think so. A lot of times these can be judgment calls. Reach out to us if you're ever not sure, and we can discuss it as a group and get you a formal answer. It is a good question, though. There is no set standard for when a permit is necessary and when it is not. Really, I think it comes down to how much time and effort is going to be involved in reviewing those changes for us and the health department. Okay, so the last section that I'm going to talk about now is with regards to the mechanical equipment room or the pump room. I probably called it a number of different things by now. That picture at the bottom is an example of a pump room. By the time we're done here, I expect you to be able to pick out what all of these individual things are and how they work. That's the idea. Okay, next slide, please. So the first question on the inspection report is the mechanical equipment room lighted, ventilated, protected, accessible, well-drained, and appropriately sized for the equipment? So this picture of all the equipment outside that's got to be a residential application, right? That doesn't apply, that doesn't work for a public pool. The main things being it needs to be protected from the weather, and it also needs to prevent unauthorized access. So we shouldn't see anything like that. Another important one that comes up a lot is drained, right? That picture on the right. A lot of times I'll see standing water in the equipment room. There's a lot of electrical equipment in there. I don't feel great stomping through a ½ inch of water when I'm doing an inspection in the pump room, knowing how much electricity is in there. That means there's probably a leak. Something's going on. Cite that as a violation. We really shouldn't be having standing water in the equipment room. Another common thing I'll cite is sometimes they like to use it as storage. They'll start storing all kinds of stuff in their equipment room, and to the point where it gets cluttered, and you need to be able to access all the equipment. And if things are getting too cluttered, too messy in there, you cite this and let's clean that up. Next slide, please. Okay, next question on the inspection is the piping constructed of appropriate materials? Are there appropriate fittings in place, arranged properly? And are they marked with labels and arrows showing the normal direction of flow? So I thought now would be a good time for some of the new folks to go over a schematic of what a typical pump room system looks like for a skimmer pool. So if you look on your left there in the middle, that is the pump. That's kind of where it all starts and where it all ends, in my opinion. So below that, you'll see the main drain line coming in and the skimmer line coming in. So like we discussed, the pump is pulling suction from the skimmers and from the main drains. There's a valve for each of those two systems so that you can balance the skimmers with the main drains, right? And then there's your pump. And then on the discharge side, or what we call the pressure side, first thing that's going to be there is the flow rate control valve. That's also called the throttle valve. That's to slow the system down if you need to. Then somewhere in line, there's going to be a flow meter. That's where you read the flow rate in gallons per minute. Then in the middle there, the big thing is your filter that pulls out all the particulates. After the filter may or may not be a heater. And then lastly is the sanitizer. That's your disinfection or your chemical feed. And then after that, it goes back to the returns for the pool. So what this question is asking really is the piping marked with labels and arrows? So knowing now what a schematic should look like, we should be able to walk into the equipment room and say, oh, look, this is this, this is this, this is the direction that it's going, and that kind of thing. Although if they're not clearly labeled and if they don't have arrows, it can be really difficult to tell what the piping arrangements are. So, you know, you should be able to, when you're in the equipment room, you should be able to say, here's the skimmers, here's the main train line, you know, here's such and such. And if it's a jumbled mess and it's impossible to tell, have them put some labels and put some arrows on there so that ourselves and the operator can have a better understanding of what's going on here. Okay, next slide, please. So the previous schematic was for a skimmer pool. As I mentioned, there's two main types of skimming, and that's either a skimmer or a gutter, the perimeter gutter. A gutter pool is a little different in that rather than the pump being directly connected to the skimmers and the main drains, these pumps are usually much, much bigger, and it's safer and more efficient for that pump to draw off of what's called a surge tank. So the gutter system that goes around the pool, it drains by gravity into the surge tank. Similarly, the main drains at the bottom of the pool, they drain by gravity into the surge tank. there's usually a modulating float valve on that main drain line to only call for water from the main drain as needed. But then you can see at the bottom of the surge tank, there's that to pump. That's where the pump suction is going to come from. Not really much you need to know or you need to do about these, but just kind of explaining the difference between the schematic for a skimmer pool versus a gutter pool. And we will touch on this a bit in a second also. Next slide, please. So the next question on the inspection report is the pump sized and functioning properly to provide for continuous uniform circulation of treated water? Okay, so the pump is kind of the key to this whole system, right? When we originally permit the pool, we very specifically spec out a pump that's going to be sized to produce the flow rate that they need to meet. We'll talk more about that in a second. And be sized properly for the pressures, the head that's in the pipe system. So the point is, they really shouldn't be replacing their pump without an equipment change form, because it's the key to success for this whole system. If they replace their pump with too small of a pump, they're not going to be able to meet the flow rates that they need. If they replace their pump with too big of a pump, then they could damage their filter. They could exceed their safe flow rates through the main drains. Could be all kinds of issues. Basically, the point here is you would cite this if your flow rate was too low, or if you saw that the pump was changed out without an equipment change approval. Let's see, another thing to note here is that these should be NSF approved for commercial use. We have seen folks buy an off-the-shelf product from Home Depot or Amazon, or some cheap foreign pump that's not NSF approved. They usually don't produce the flow rates that they're spec'd out to produce. They will burn up too quickly, that kind of thing. We need to be buying legitimate approved commercial products. Next slide, please. Yeah, and also the rule mentions it needs to be continuous. The pump needs to run 24/7. So a lot of times this is a run timer. This is an old school run timer. What this would do would shut off your pump or shut off your electrical system for certain hours, typically overnight. I know a lot of folks, when they have a residential pool, they'll shut off their pump overnight to save energy, save on their electricity bill. However, for a commercial pool, you got to keep that thing running all night. Shouldn't be seeing any run timer that looks like this. Now, of course, modern pool pumps, they're electronic, they're digital, they have digital control. They could theoretically program that type of thing in without us having any idea. But yeah, you should know that the pump should be running 24/7. Next slide, please. Okay, so regarding splash pads or spray pads, this isn't in our inspection form, but just wanted to throw this in there because I'm sure there's some of you that do inspections on these. It's important to note that our Michigan rules do not include any reference to splash pads at all. We look to the Model Aquatic Health Code for guidance. The key thing here is that there's really two main types of splash pads. There's recirculating, where the water is collected, treated, and sent back through. Or there's flow through or single pass, where you got your source of water, you send it through the fixtures, and it goes to waste. Now, if they're recirculating, then we need to be treating them like a pool, like any other public pool. We need to make sure that they're tested, treated, filtered, etc. If there's a splash pad in your coverage area and you're not sure if it's flow through or if it's recirculating, please reach out to us and we will make that determination. We do every once in a while find recirculating spray pads that were unlicensed that we weren't aware of. And those are a huge concern, right? Spray pads have been a source of deadly outbreaks in the past. You've got vulnerable populations, you've got kids in diapers. Yeah, if the water's not being properly treated and recirculated, they can be a huge health risk. So check with us if you're not sure. Better to be safe than sorry. Next slide, please. Okay, and I think that's it for me.
Okay, I'll take over this next section. It's a continuation of the mechanical equipment room, and it will cover the questions 4 through 10. Next slide. So the first question relates to the flow rate control valve. Josh mentioned the location of this being after the pump in the schematic he showed previously. So the picture here you'll see circled in red. This is a large pool with redundant pumps. So this is a very large scale of a flow control valve. Typically on your smaller pools, it'll just be on a 2 or 3 inch PVC, and you'll see they're typically red handles, but similar design. And what this does is allow you to have a little bit more control to dial in the flow rate. So when you have a flow rate range, you can adjust that valve to assure that you're not operating over the range that's set for that pool. Most of the times these are really helpful for single speed pumps, but the newer pumps we see now are variable speed due to the Department of Energy requiring some more restrictions on the manufacturing of the pumps, that they need to be variable speed in order to be energy efficient. So with those variable speed pumps, you can set those, and Josh again mentioned that, you can set them to what flow you desire, and they pretty much stick to that. But if you need to dial in a little bit more, that's where these valves come in. But we still do also have single speed pumps that are in use, and that's where these come into play more so. Next slide. The next question relates to the flow meters and the adequate rate. These 3 show the typical flow meters that are more common. The first one is a blue-white, and that is a very inexpensive flow meter. You see them very frequently. The con to this flow meter is that a lot of times you'll get dirt particles or just debris that seats inside of this flow meter. What you have is a little bobber or a float, and that is where you read the flow from. It's at the top of that float is where you would read that. And a lot of times that debris or dirt will get caught up on that float, and then it doesn't function. So they do require more maintenance for cleaning, but they are very inexpensive. One thing with these flow meters is you want to make sure that the scale you're reading from, as you can see, one side says for schedule 80 pipe, the other side says schedule 40. You'll want to make sure what pipe this is located on so that you're reading from the accurate side of that flow range. Also, another thing to make sure of is I've seen where the flow meter for this example, this is a 1.5 inch flow meter. You can see on the bottom, it indicates an 1.5 inches. A lot of times they are misplaced. So I've seen where this 1.5 inches gets placed on a 2-inch return pipe. So it's not going to give you an accurate reading as well. So make sure that it's actually sized for the size pipe that it's located on. And then also with the blue-white or this style, there are other brands as well, but this style flow meter, the manufacturer requires straight pipe distance for the location of this. So blue-white specifically requires a straight pipe of 5 times the pipe diameter upstream and 2 times the pipe diameter downstream. And what that allows is to not have a turbulent flow through that pipe section so that this flow meter can accurately read the flow. So that's another thing to keep in mind. And a lot of times you'll see these near elbows or near a valve, and that's not going to give an accurate flow. Some of the equipment rooms just are piped or have been repiped without our knowledge, and then these place inaccurately. So there may be instances where they need to repipe to provide that adequate straight pipe distance. The middle flow meter is a FlowVis. I love these flow meters. They're low maintenance. You don't get the debris issue that you do with the other flow meter. They don't need straight pipe distances. They're much more user-friendly as far as maintenance, and you can place them anywhere. You can put them near an elbow or a valve, and it doesn't affect the flow reading on these. So one thing to keep in mind with these, though, is for the scale, is if it's less than a 3-inch pipe that these are located on, those are made for Schedule 40 pipe. If it's above a 3-inch pipe, those meters are made for Schedule 80 pipe. And at 3-inch exactly, there's a different scale that's available from the manufacturer for whichever pipe it's on. The 3-inch can be used for both Schedule 40 or Schedule 80, but you have to have the correct scale for whichever pipe is being used. So those are some key things to be aware of for that. And these flow meters are much more expensive, but you don't end up with the maintenance and you don't have to replace them like you do with the blue-white flow meters. So that is one advantage of them as well. Now, the third meter is a digital meter. They're Signet or Meg meter. You'll see these more so on large scale pools, the YMCA, high school, college pools, mostly the competition pools, and it's a digital readout display. And really not too much issue with that. Maybe if the probe gets dirty, it could require some cleaning, but these are more so just the large scales that you probably typically won't see. Next slide. So with that, now that we know where the gauge is located, and I do want to mention too, Josh had shown where the location, they can be both either before or after the filter. The rules specifically state that that's the location for the flow meter. So you may see them in varying locations depending on the facility. So now that we know how to look at the flow meter, what flow rates are we looking for? So the rules dictate that pool turnovers are specific to the type of pool. So it's 6 hours or less for a swimming pool, and a spa pool is 1 hour or less. And then other various pools have their own related turnover rates. And notice it says or less. So we also look at hydraulics and some other things, and that's done during plan review. But just a rule of thumb is this is what we're shooting for. Next slide. So we read flow in gallons per minute. And as mentioned, let's just take a swimming pool that's at 6 hours. You can get a rule of thumb of the 6 hours, but hydraulically, if it's a skimmer pool, we look at 37.5 gallons per minute per skimmer. So for example, if you took a volume of a pool and calculated the 6 hour turnover rate, it could equal a 70 gallon per minute flow rate. However, it may require 2 skimmers. So if you took those 2 skimmers multiplied by the 37.5 gallons per minute per skimmer, that equates to a 75 gallon per minute flow rate. So that's what dictates what the minimum flow rate would be that skimmer flow rate. So this is how when we do plan review, we calculate what the minimum flow rate would be. And if you have questions on a pool or are unsure of what that flow rate should be, you can reach out to us. We can look at our records and help determine what that flow rate range would be. But this is just generally kind of how we would generically calculate it. And then on the maximum side of the flow, we look at the equipment, the pipe size, the main drains. There are various items that would max out what their flow rate could be. Typically, I see the filters as being a maximum issue because you don't want to exceed the filtration rate. So on newer pools, we've been very diligent about trying to give a min and max flow rate. In older pools, this was not done so much. I think there was maybe the minimum flow rate shown on the old design details and maybe the design flow rate, which really meant nothing. It's just at that time what the facility was hoping to operate the pool at. So again, if you have questions on older pools, please reach out to us and we can help you calculate where that flow rate range should be. And also with that, older pools sometimes have still an 8-hour turnover rate. That's what they were reviewed against when they were constructed. And if they've not made any major modifications, the rules still allow them to operate at an 8-hour turnover rate. So we do have quite a few pools still on an 8-hour turnover rate, which then would be a lesser flow rate. So again, reach out to us if you're unsure or if you see an older pool that's operating at a lower flow rate than you think it should. It still could be a valid flow rate for that pool. When you're out there and you find that that flow meter is not functioning, that's a problem because we don't know if it's turning over properly. I've seen where I've looked back historically at just the last 3 years of inspections, and again, it'll show no flow rate and a flow meter needing to be repaired. But there's no timeline or follow-up for that. That should be an issue that is made to be corrected immediately so that we're aware that that pool is turning over properly. So when you see that either the flow is not within range or it's not functioning, it needs to be at least a conditional, and potentially it could be a closure if it's been a chronic problem, but at least a conditional where they have a specific timeline to correct it, and it should be very, very quickly, within a week at most, to turn around the correction of that to assure they're obtaining the correct flow rate. Next slide. Oh, I do see a question. So is flow rate for each pool available on the license? No, unfortunately, it's not on the license. This is something that's been in our files or in the design detail if you have one in your file. Eventually, within MiEHDWIS, these will be updated. They're not even all updated for all our pools currently in MiEHDWIS. So it does take some looking into the back file if you need assistance on the flow rate. So if in your files you don't have that information, just reach out to us and we can assist you on that. So the next question deals with filters and gauges functioning properly. On all filters, you're going to see some sort of a gauge. This gauge here shows a start and a clean filter notation on it. Not all gauges show that. I've seen a lot of operators, it's just a complete PSI gauge that has no denotation on it, and they'll take a Sharpie, and when that filter is clean, they'll note what PSI with a little mark at what PSI it is, and then you take 10 PSI above that, and that's typically the rule of thumb of where you would want to clean that filter. So it's a differentiation of 10 PSI from a clean filter to where you want to backwash or clean the cartridges or whatever type of filter you have. Next slide. So here's 3 types of common filters that you'll see. The first one is a sand filter. That's the most common, I think, and you can see the cutaway. Basically, you have it in the inlet portion to it is at the top, and it's like a shower head basically that sprinkles the water over the sand bed. The water filters through the sand bed. then cleans that water, and it then filters down through to the baffles at the bottom, and then sucks on through to the return pipe, and then out to disinfectant the remaining equipment. Sometimes you'll see if those baffles are broken, maybe at the returns out in the pool, you might see some sand at those returns. That's kind of a key to a potentially broken baffle or something going on in that sand filter, just as a side note. The second type of filter in the center are cartridge filters. This one shows 4 cartridges. There's filters that have a single cartridge or 2 cartridges. It just depends on the make and model of that filter. So for these, what you need to have on hand is a spare set of cartridges. So when that filter gauge shows that it needs cleaning, then you would just replace those with your spare cartridges, and then you can take those cartridges out and clean them and then keep them on hand as your backups for the next time, and then you keep swapping them out. This third filter shown is a regenerative media filter. These are more so used on the large competition pools. Like I mentioned, at high schools, colleges, YMCAs, the bigger pools that are 100+ gallons. These use typically perlite, and there's some other similar DE type filters. And these have some membranes in them that are used for filtration. They're coated and they attract all of the particles. And then it's a bump system is what they call it. It kind of just does a little, I guess, bump to it. So it knocks off all those particles and then does a little sort of backwash. And this is done by the controller on that filter. So it's a little bit different than what you'd see for a cartridge or a sand filter. Next slide. The next question covers chemical feeders and if they're functioning properly. So this picture shows some examples of what you commonly will see for a chemical feeder. The first one is an erosion feeder. This one is a smaller erosion feeder. A lot of times they'll have a taller column for a larger pool, but in essence, they're the same. It's just they hold more of the disinfectant, and they can either be plumbed directly in the piping, or you'll sometimes see smaller tubes that are on near the pump and then the return going to the return line just before it exits the equipment room. So those are the 2 common ways that you'll see that connected. And then the middle one is sodium hypochlorite. This is basically liquid chlorine, and that has a peristaltic pump that pumps the liquid into the system. Many times these are associated with a controller just to help have the flow being controlled and evenly displaced into the system. And then the third picture is a salt chlorine generator. And what that does is you add salt to the pool or through a brine tank, and then this is in the return line. And when the water comes through here, it's electrically, the ion of the chlorine is removed from that salt, and that's how the chlorine gets then placed back into the pool by an electrical means to dissociate that ion. Next slide. So how do we know if they're functioning properly? So obviously you're going to have your test kit, you're going to take your residual, your PHN residual. And so if you do see that you have proper residual, most likely that chemical feeder is functioning properly. However, I've seen some instances where the feeder is actually not connected, or if you look at the dial, it's not turned on and they've been hand feeding. And sometimes you can see this too, if, when you're removing the covers to the skimmers, sometimes you've seen pucks in the skimmer basket because they're chlorinating through that. That is not allowed. The rules indicate that you need to have a continual means to add the chemicals, and that means a feeder that is actually plumbed into the system in one way or another. So the other thing with feeders too is you want to make sure that the proper chemical is used for that feeder. Specific feeders are, the manufacturer specifies what the chemical is for their specific feeder. So for example, if you have a Pentair HC3315, very common feeder, that uses trichlor. You cannot put calcium hypochlorite into that feeder. It's not meant for it. It doesn't function or dissolve the chemical. It's not been tested for that, so we can't mix chemicals. And that's the other thing too, is if somebody's using the wrong type of chemical, you don't want them to switch over to the proper chemical, because the chemicals could be incompatible, they could be flammable, it could be a danger to mix those chemicals as well. So they either need to absolutely completely clean thoroughly that feeder in order to transition over to the proper chemical, or they should replace the feeder for one with which chemical they want to use. Next slide. So the next question deals with other air and water pump systems complying. So typically what you'll see are the jet system in the spas. There are other features that you may see additional pumps for as well. Features we don't really care if they're operating or not, if it's a little deck spray feature or a little waterfall. But if they're there, they should be functioning properly. So you're just going to want to make sure that the pump is operating. But on the jet systems, it's a little more involved. So they have a timer to turn on that jet system, and you'll want to make sure that that timer works. That timer should not be accessible from being within the spa. And then also there's an emergency shutoff at spas. And that emergency shutoff should be checked when you're doing the inspection. And you should look at determining if that emergency shutoff shuts off just the jet pump, or if it also shuts off the filter pump. So the rules require the filter pump to operate 24/7, no matter what, and that there should not be a shutoff for it. That is in conjunction with this jet system, that the shutoff is usually in the equipment room. However, there are some jurisdictions of building codes that do require that to be together. And if so, it should have an alarm. And a lot of times you'll see like a plexiglass cover as well, so they're not inadvertently shut off. So if that pump does get shut off, it's alarmed so that the operator or whoever is looking after the pool is alerted that the filter pump is also shut off, and that they can make sure it gets turned back on. So we've had instances where that inadvertently got shut off and no pump was running for a period of time, especially if not many people are using the spa. Next slide. Water heater and thermometers is the next question. So water heaters are not required. We see them most times. And if we do, a thermometer needs to be on the inlet side. I think Zach kind of covered this as well when he went over the temperatures. So make sure it's on the inlet side. And also newer heaters actually have on their display that they read both the inlet temperature and the set temperature. We've accepted that as well, but it has to read both. We are looking for what the inlet temperature is, so that we can verify if it's exceeding the 104 degrees or if it's exceeding any other temperature requirements for signage. Next slide. And the last question deals with vacuum system on hand. Pretty straightforward. Do they have the vacuum? Are they cleaning it? Do you see dirt, debris? And they should have that in their equipment room or storage room. You should be able to see that, and they should have that readily available. Next slide. So that was it for that set of questions. So continuing on with the mechanical equipment room, these are questions 11 through 14. Next slide. So the first question deals with whether or not chemicals are stored properly. I don't think this is something that we've really focused on too much. It's in the rules. There's also MiEHDWIS requirements. You know, fire marshal has requirements as well. But it's something that we've been trying to address more so lately and making swimming pool facilities more aware. These chemicals need to be stored in a clean and dry, away from any heat or flammables, in a well-ventilated area. A lot of times what you'll see is what this picture shows. They're just, chemicals are just sitting on the equipment room floor. There could be water leaks. Some of these are in bags or boxes that could get wet. If something spilled, there's no differentiation between the chemicals. They could be mixing. And if you find that your acid's mixing with your chlorine, you can get chlorine gas, which is very toxic. And there's no smell to it. You could walk into an equipment room, especially one if it's not as well ventilated as it should. It could be fatal if inhaled. So with all of these chemicals, they should be stored either on shelves or up off the ground, assuring that's in a cool, dry place. You shouldn't be storing them one on top of another. So if you have shelving units, you shouldn't be putting your chlorine above your acid. They should be separated in some fashion. Ideally, you would like some spill protection like the picture shows on the right. But we don't always see that, but that would be an ideal situation where they do have some spill protection. Next slide. So the next question deals with the water supply and whether it's adequate and protected. So this is also a plan review item that we look at and make sure that typically for the most part we see these RPZs where they're reduced pressure zone backflow preventers, which is on the left. But you should also, when you're in the equipment room, be able to see this as well on the fill line. And the other option for that is an air gap. The RPZs are very expensive. They're, $1,000+ for one of these units, and they require annual testing, and the testing has to be completed by a certified tester. So it is very expensive. A municipal supply requires these, and the municipality or water authority is the one that typically should be assuring these are properly tested. However, that doesn't always happen. You should be able to see a tag on these, and that tag will indicate the date that it was last tested. And again, it's an annual testing for these. If they're on a type 2 water supply, it is probably the more responsibility of either the non-community water supply person in your health department to review those on their sanitary survey. But again, that's every 5 years. So another check is when you're in there doing the pool inspection, just take an eyeball and see if you can find the tag and assure that they have proper testing. The other means of backflow prevention is the air gap, which much cheaper and doesn't require testing. But with that, you'll need to make sure that it's 2 times the diameter of the pipe for the air gap distance. I don't see these air gaps very often. I think it's a little more difficult in equipment rooms to provide that air gap. So I do see the RPZ more often. Next slide. So the next question is wastewater facilities. Again, we're looking for backflow prevention. So the rules indicate the only proper backflow prevention for the wastewater system is an air gap. So when you see backwash water or pool drainage, it should be via an air gap to a sump in the equipment room, or sometimes you'll see a large standpipe. But that air gap again is 2 times the distance of that discharge pipe to a maximum of 1 foot. So in large scale pools, you might have a quite large discharge diameter pipe. So you don't need, 3 feet of discharge gap or air gap. it's only a maximum of a foot. So, you know, sometimes you'll see what you call an air break. That's where the pipe is cut off at an angle. That technically isn't an air gap. So the pipe should be cut off straight with a clean break between that pipe and where it discharges to. And with that too, the discharge should be to, our first means is to the sanitary sewer. And again, we check on this when we do the plan review. So we're looking for that to be to the sanitary sewer. If not, the second is a storm sewer, or we would look at a retention or detention basin. And in some instances, we do allow ground surface discharge. For example, if you have a campground that's out in the countryside, no access to sanitary or storm sewers, we do allow a discharge to the ground surface. And that's permitted during the plan review as well. It should be in a location that's not a nuisance, is permeable enough to not have standing water after usually about an hour is what our rule of thumb is. And then also too, I want to mention the NPDES permit. So that's the National Pollution Discharge Elimination System permit. So that is if you discharge to storm sewer, or if it's, say, a basin that ultimately has a discharge to a lake or stream, they are required to have an EGLE NPDES permit for that discharge as well. There are some municipalities that don't allow pool discharge to their sanitary. For example, the city of Ann Arbor is one of them that I cover. And so every one of their swimming pools in the city requires an NPDES permit because they are connected to the storm sewer. So I do know a lot of old pools are connected to storm without an NPDES permit. So when we do come across these, we do try to get them in compliance. Also, if you have a facility that has its own on-site wastewater system, that pool discharge should not go to their sanitary drain field system. I've seen where we have a couple instances where there's a separate drain field system that is specifically only for pool discharge. It has nothing to do with their sanitary. So, oh, there we go. Nothing to do with their sanitary, so it should not be placed in with their sanitary sewage system, because the chemicals that could potentially be in there can kill the bacteria that would be necessary for the proper operation of their actual sewage system. Also too, I have had questions asked about a backwater valve for these. And again, like I mentioned initially, the only means is an air gap. There's very rare instances where we have allowed this backwater valve, but that's a case by case. So if you run across something that looks funny to you or just isn't something that you're familiar with, you can always reach out to us and ask us. We can look in the file, or if need be, we can also assist on an inspection as well. Next slide. So the next question deals with approvals for new equipment. So if you are out there doing your inspection and you see a shiny new pump, but in your file you didn't get an equipment change form from us, we always copy the health department and the facility when we approve equipment change forms for whatever piece of equipment it is. If you don't have one in your file and you see something changed, you would want to bring that to their attention and have them submit a form after the fact, just so that we can update MiEHDWIS and that we can verify that it is an actually approved piece of equipment, or pump in this case. A lot of times people will replace a 1 horsepower pump for a 1 horsepower pump, but all pumps are not equal. They each have their own pump curve. They're each designed differently. Different manufacturers have different flow rates for their associated pump, even if they're the same horsepower. So we can run into difficulties with meeting flow rates if it's not prior approved. And if that's the case, we have had instances where we've had to have them replace a brand new piece of equipment that they spent a lot of money on because they did not get the proper approval and they're not adequately producing the right flow rate or the filter rate or what have you. So it's very important that they do this prior to replacing equipment. So if you do find that on an inspection, reach out to us and have them, you can note on the inspection form to submit an equipment change form to us for approval, and you can mark that form conditionally until that's attained and we can work it from there. Sometimes I do get phone calls too from in the field just asking about certain pieces of equipment, and I can, sometimes say yes or no if it's acceptable and then still have them do a form. So that way you don't have to close them should it not be something that you're familiar with. Next slide.
Hi,
So-
Barbara.
Yep, sorry, I turned it over to Barbara.
Yeah, so thank you, Karen. I am going to be reviewing safety requirements, bathhouse requirements, and some information regarding swim-up bars. I will also be discussing closure orders. Safety requirements are found in several sections of the rules, including 65 for equipment and emergency telephone, 91 for lifelines, 92 for control of sharp and hazardous objects, as well as food, 93 for bather capacity, and 98 for lifeguarding. Most of these items are considered high risk if not in compliance, and violations can be means for a non-compliant inspection or pool closure. The next few slides will go into detail on items 1 through 4 shown on this slide. Next slide, please. Lifeguard on duty or sign posted. Lifeguards are required if the pool is owned or operated by a governmental entity, public corporation, or school. The total water surface area within the swimming pool enclosure is more than 2,400 square feet, and a diving board is provided. If lifeguard service is required, then a swimming pool owner or operator shall ensure that one lifeguard for every 75 people within the swimming pool is on duty in the enclosure when the swimming pool is open for use. And if not required, there must be a posted or no lifeguard on duty sign. Things to review here include making sure the sign is posted if no lifeguard is required, verification of enough lifeguards present, and lifeguard certifications are current. Current lifeguard certifications may be posted on a bulletin board within the enclosure. If not, they should be available at the office, readily available for review, and can be included in review of other paperwork during the inspection, such as the contingency plan and monthly operating reports. Next slide, please. Telephone available, evident, and sign posted. The number to call, which is now 911, and address of the facility must be posted at the phone per Rule 65. Provide any additional instructions required to dial out, such as if the building itself requires you to dial 9 to get out of the phone system. Test the phone during the inspection and verify the address is correct. And do definitely recommend testing the phone and asking the 911 operator that answers, can you tell me what the address that this phone is calling from? Landlines are strongly preferred. Alternate types of phones may be approved by EGLE and/or local health departments on a case-by-case basis. The emergency phone may be directed to the front desk for the desk attendant to call 911, as long as there is always a desk attendant on duty during the pool hours. There are situations where a landline is not available. Our rules have not been updated since 2000 and do not speak to cell phones or internet phones specifically, so we have developed further guidelines based on the Model Aquatic Health Code. If something other than a landline is proposed, we are looking for the phone to be tethered to assure it remains readily available, has reliable service, so emergency contact is readily accessible and is hardwired to power with a battery backup that is readily usable. A couple notes here. The service contract with the phone provider can provide more reliability than a Wi-Fi connection. And also, if a system such as this is used, the address posted near the phone becomes very important, as 911 dispatchers can't always determine the caller's address immediately over cellular service. And please feel free to reach out to us with any specific questions regarding phones you may encounter. Next slide, please. Hazardous objects, food, or drinks controlled. First three of these have to do with hazardous objects, food, or drinks. The swimming pool owner shall post a sign that prohibits glass, other breakable materials, and hazardous objects in the pool enclosure. The swimming pool owner shall prominently display at the pool a sign warning against the pool after use of consumption of alcoholic beverages. And regarding food or drink, Rule 92.8, if the pool owner or operates allows food or drink and associated articles in the swimming pool enclosure, then the owner shall prominently display a sign conveying requirements for safe and sanitary disposal of all food wastes and precluding consumption of food and beverages within the pool. Rule 94.8 deals with the maximum operating water temperature and warning against the use of pool by young children when the normal water temperature is more than 86 degrees Fahrenheit. The first three items are usually in the general signage within the enclosure regarding the hazardous objects, food, and drink. One note regarding Rule 92.8a that requires poolside control of food and drink to maintain safe and sanitary conditions. This may be in the form of a roped area and a signage to indicate the exact area where consumption of food and drink is allowed within the enclosure only. The spa signage is usually separate and near the spa with the maximum temperature of 104 degrees Fahrenheit clearly stated. Some pools do choose to elevate their pool water temperature above 86 due to bather age, activity, etc. If so, the pool should have a similar sign posted near the pool, which warns against the use by young children and clearly indicates the pool temperature is above 86 degrees. Next slide, please. Continued safety items include lifelines, safety equipment, and bather load. These will be addressed in the following slides.
Barbara, there's a quick question about calling 911.
If we do call 911, do we state where we are from and what we are calling for? Yes, I always, say I am, calling from a pool. I am doing a routine inspection. This is a non-emergency call. I don't state exactly where we're from because I want them to tell me that information. I want them to read me back the same address that I'm looking at on the sign. So I hope that answers your question, Michelle.
If I can speak on this a little bit, Barbara, if it is a cell phone and they, I ask where do you have us located at, and they should be able to tell you a general location, but it's not going to be exact. So I do still ask that. I'll ask the address or just ask the address, and then they'll say, well, we have you somewhere by this street, So that's how I handle it. But it's pretty rare that we get to where a cell phone is used. So in most cases, they provide the address to us.
Correct. And you can certainly, say I am calling from Comfort Inn Pool and wherever. Yeah, that makes sense. Next slide, please. lifelines. Rule 3210 states that a swimming pool owner shall provide a lifeline at a swimming pool other than a water slide pool or a wave pool at a change in floor slope where the water depth is less than 5 feet or at the 5-foot depth if the slope does not change. A swimming pool owner shall ensure that the lifeline has floats and anchors in both sidewalls near the water level. And the lifeline needs to be in its intended place unless when removed for supervised activity. And the biggest thing here is that if a lifeline is required, to make sure that it is in place and in good condition. This is a high-risk item if not in compliance. Next slide, please. Safety equipment includes a spine board with 3 ties, runners, and a head immobilizer, a first aid kit fully stocked, a blood spill kit, a one-piece 12-foot long rescue pole which may have a shepherd's crook, and a throw rope with one end attached to a ring buoy or rescue bag. If lifeguards are required, they need to have megaphones or there be a public address system available, 1 whistle per lifeguard on duty, 1 rescue tube per lifeguard on duty, and 1 resuscitation mask per lifeguard on duty. They must all be kept in the pool enclosure and be kept well stocked, in good repair, and in ready condition. Check for the safety equipment, and I'll show some of that on the next slide. If there is a lifeguarded pool and there are not megaphones observed, do ask if there's a PA system and that it's working. The safety equipment. For the spine board, the runners need to be attached in a good condition. I've seen some where they're just disintegrating away and could not be used. The straps and the head immobilizer should be in good shape, usable, and the same comment there. The straps can disintegrate and become unusable. The spine board needs to be present in an easily accessible area within the enclosure. The first aid kits, check to make sure they're stocked and have a blood spill kit present. The rescue pole needs to be assembled in one piece. It can't be like this one shown, not assembled, and it has to be easily acceptable within the enclosure. The throwing rope should be a 1/4 inch diameter, as long as 1.5 times the maximum width of the swimming pool, or 50 feet, whichever is less, with one end attached to an 18-inch diameter ring buoy or rescue bag. Things to check for here are frayed rope, attachment, and that is present in an accessible area to bathers, not an equipment closet, not in a mechanical room. Next slide, please. Bather load. The swimming pool owner shall ensure that the number of persons in bathing apparel within a swimming pool enclosure does not exceed the bather capacity limit established by the department or local health department. Maximum bather load must be prominently displayed within the swimming pool enclosure. And each water body's bather load should be posted separately if there is more than one pool within the same enclosure. For example, a swimming pool and a spa. Bather load is determined during the plan review and takes into account the deck capacity as well as pool area depth and bench seating. Facilities can post a bather load less than what is licensed. The design detail sheet provided by EGLE and the construction permit will state the bather load. However, they're not always accessible to you. Bather load is a high-risk item if not posted, and you can always call us and ask if you are unsure, or if it does not look like it's correct. Next slide, please. Bathhouse requirements are shown here. Cleanliness, condition repair, and providing soap are included in 91. the number of facilities and fixtures in 74 and 75, construction materials in 76, and tempered water in 25. While these items are considered low risk if not in compliance, a history of the same violation over time can elevate any of these requirements to a higher risk level. The next few slides will go into detail on items 1 through 3 shown on this slide. And as to the question, is the bather load on the dynamic inspection? I believe the answer to this is yes. And if there's any backup on that, if we have it in your system, I do believe that in our system, I do believe that it should show on the dynamic inspection. At least that's what we're working towards. Shower, toilet, and dressing room clean. It's pretty self-explanatory. Is there mold on any surface? Is the floor free from debris? Are the garbage cans overflowing? Is there an odor? Are the shower curtains clean? Are they present? Next slide, please. This is also pretty self-explanatory. Are the sinks, are the showers, are the toilets working? Is there water on the floor? Is the bathhouse open? Does it have a not out of order closed sign on it? Is the floor non-slip? Is it safe for bare feet? Next slide, please. Hot water and soap provided. Check for soap. Run a couple of the sinks and showers to confirm the hot water is present, that the water pressure and amount is sufficient. Hot water should be between 90 and 110 degrees Fahrenheit. And again, while a single inspection item is low risk, several over time may result in unsafe conditions overall. Next slide, please. The swim-up bar requirements are listed in the statute, not the rules, and were promulgated in 2022. As of today, there are 2 licensed swim-up bars in the state. As they are more recent developments, the design detail sheet, approved plans, and construction permit will be accessible to your department, and as they will be sent with the construction permit approval. Each element on the inspection form has high risk if a violation is found. For items 1 through 3, make sure all serving, preparing, and consuming food and beverage areas are cleaned and sanitized, have no open cracks or joints coming unsealed, and the pool water is not splashing onto the food and drink storage or preparation areas. For item 4, the level of increased disinfection residual for review on the monthly operating report will be noted on the design detail and construction permit and will be site specific. For item 5, an electronic chemical control monitoring system should be present. Next slide, please. For item 6, review the MORs to ensure 4 times daily residual monitoring and refer to the design detail for specific residuals to be maintained. We do not currently have 4 separate column spaces on either the printed PDF form or the fillable PDF on our website. If you do have a swim-up bar in your area, an alternate form may be used, and you can contact us for options. Lifeguarding is necessary, and a CPO is required for pool operation. Check that these licenses are valid and make sure the certifications are up to date. Lastly, inspect food and beverage containers to ensure they are non-breakable and reduce chances of spilling into the pool water. Next slide, please. This slide presents a good summary of requirements from section 12526A just discussed. The height and disinfection listed here is specified during plan review and includes filter system specification, regenerative media or equivalent, accelerated turnover of once every 4 hours or less when in use, UV light, secondary disinfection system or equivalent, increased inlets to increase circulation due to obstructions such as permanent tables or seating within the pool, and increased number of skimmers or surge wears. Testing for a swim up bar is required 4 times a day. Next slide, please. And yes, I did. There are only 2 approved swim up bars in the state. One is in Frankenmuth, and the other is Mount Bohemia. And those have been through extensive review with our department in the last couple of years. Getting back to the inspection report, this is a place where you can upload photos of infractions or anything else noted during your inspection. Next slide, please. In determining final compliance status, you will be asked for the date and compliance recommendation. Choices are in compliance, in substantial compliance, either approved or approved with conditions, or not in compliance, not approved. Next slide, please. In compliance, there are no issues or concerns. No compliant comments were included in the report. In substantial compliance or conditional on the paper forms, only minor issues or concerns were identified. Follow-up inspection may be necessary. Not in compliance, multiple minor issues or concerns, 1 or more major issues. Compliance comments are included on the report and EGLE staff will review. Follow-up inspection is usually necessary, and continued licensure and operation are not recommended. A couple of notes here: in substantial compliance or conditional on the paper form is essentially a yes. We will issue the license if this is chosen. Please note that EGLE has the ability to revise compliance status. If we see major violations cited on an inspection but a final yes status, we will downgrade it to a no or vice versa. Next slide, please. There are some conditions that require immediate closure of the pool. And we are currently using the paper form as it can be handed to the owner on site. A no status does not, on the inspection, does not mean they are immediately shut down, but a closure order does. I will go over some violations, but they include no disinfectant in the pool, missing main drain cover. Rule 8 does lay out the specifics of how it needs to be constructed. It needs to be served or hand delivered to the owner so that there is no doubt whether it has been issued. And it must include instructions for how to resolve the violations and reopen. If they continue to operate without a license or under a closure order, continue EGLE for an elevated enforcement. And the boxes on this form, the first has to do with, is there a condition of the swimming pool equipment, structure, area, or enclosure which jeopardizes health or safety? So we're looking for, is the pool structure and the deck area sound? Are they not disintegrating? If there is a diving board or starting platforms, are they compliant? Are the skimmers or the gutter system working properly? The water level not below the gutters or not below the skimmer, or the gutters not being flooded? Are there main drain covers missing? Is the water clarity compliant? This has been discussed, and this is a big one. Is the safety equipment there? Is it in good shape? Is the emergency telephone there? Does it call out? And is the address posted? The second item is lack of properly functioning equipment for recirculating, treating, or testing the swimming pool water. The pump should always be running, as we have discussed. The filters and the chemical feeders should be working. The test kits need to be up to date. They need to have evidence there that they are actually being used by the qualified personnel. The third one deals with the lack of supervisory personnel or lifeguards. Is a qualified person on site, or do they arrive within 15 minutes of being called up? And if there is nobody on site, have the operator or the owner make that phone call and time them. How long does it take? Sometimes it takes a very long time. Does the person know what they're doing? Have them do the water test to make sure they know how, ask them to perform a backwash, go over the MORs with them, make sure that they are competent in their duties. And again, if the MORs are all filled out the same, that's a real big red flag. Are the lifeguards present? Are the certifications valid and up to date? And then the fourth is the presence of a pollutant or a hazardous object or substance in the water. Glass, sharp objects, feces, vomit, sewage. And the fifth is failure to meet a water quality standard. Do the disinfectant residuals fall within the range? Does the pH fall within range? Is the cyaniuric acid too high? Or are the bacteriological water results positive or missing? These are all means for closure. And as always, please be aware that medium or even low priority items can reach high priority status if repeated or left to progress, and these should be taken into consideration. I'm going to turn the presentation back to Jessica for the remaining slides.
All right. I know we are kind of over time, and so I'm going to go through these last few slides rather quickly. So once you finish your inspection, you push complete, you're going to submit to EGLE by clicking that button. It's going to automatically generate an inspection report. This is what the inspection report is going to look like. It's not going to auto-populate once you click that button. You do have to go and get it. So just to kind of go over what the inspection report looks like, it's going to give you all the details about the pool, your name, your comments, kind of those details. And then the second page is going to go over all of the violations, their risk level. It's going to give you every comment that you entered for that, and the timeline that you entered is going to be right there in the comments and the corresponding regulations. So this is really helpful for you, as well as the operator, so they know what needs to be done to correct their violations. Like I said, you can't immediately get this once you push that submit button. So you do have to go in to the activity. So this view is showing what it's going to be like for a external user, so an operator. It's the same process for you as a health inspector, but you are likely going to have to explain this to them, as this process is new for everyone. So when they log in, they're going to get a dashboard. It's going to have the activities on it. They're going to select that activity related to their annual or initial pool inspection. They're going to scroll all the way down to the bottom where they see EGLE attachments. They can click on the eyeball that will populate a PDF view of the inspection report, or they can download that inspection report to keep in their records. You as a local health department will take the same steps. You can click on the activity, scroll down to EGLE attachments, and see the report there. All right, and so that kind of wraps us up for our presentation today. Sorry that we went a little bit over. Yeah, so you can, I see a question about if you can print a copy of the dynamic form. You do have the ability, it is really long to do that. So you can download a copy of the dynamic form and print it out, but I think it's, upwards of 13, 14 pages once you get all that information in it. We are working on making a more condensed version of that to share, but that's still in the works. Um,
So for the dynamic inspection form, we don't have a signature required on that. And then the next question, can you upload pool reports from LHD or do we need to be using the dynamic form? Currently, we accept the paper form to be uploaded or the dynamic form to be used. And we're in that transitional period. I'm not sure if that's always going to be available, but right now you can still use the old form and upload it. And if you want to get used to using this software, you could always go out and do the inspection with the paper form, come back to the office and act like you're doing the dynamic inspection back in the office. And then you would have an opportunity to play with these and have the answers on your old inspection form. That's an option for getting used to this.
Any last questions?
So for the dynamic form, as soon as you hit submit, that inspection report is available to the facility on their MiEHDWIS account. So they can just log into their account and the inspection report is there right away. With the carbon copies, if you have carbon copies that you leave in and when you run out of those, we have no more. So we're not distributing those anymore. So if you do use a paper copy in the field and you print it off and you don't have the triplicate, you can have them take a picture with their cell phone to have a copy of their inspection report until that inspection report gets uploaded to the system. So MiEHDWIS does not work offline. You need to have a cellular connection or Wi-Fi connection to do the digital inspection, and that can be a problem in some areas for some pools. We don't have an answer for when it's going to be a requirement to use the dynamic form yet at this time. And that's all the questions that I see right now in the chat. If additional questions arise when this ends, you can throw them in the chat or send us to any one of us individually and we can assist. And then, yeah, as always, if you've got questions on an inspection, you can try to reach out to us or, when you get done back to the office, feel free to contact us and we can assist with any of those questions you have.
You can download the report yourself if you wanted to and email it. They should have access to their MiEHDWIS account, so they should be able to access it. But if you wanted to do that, you could download that report and email it as well. Thank you, everyone.